Hello, Lauren. Welcome to our first ever Thursday edition of Tech Bros. How you doing this Thursday afternoon? Hanging in there?
I am so busy. This is like the tired part of the year. I think we talked last week about someone was like, "Oh, EOD." Like I thought that meant end of December, and someone's like, "No, man, it means end of day." And the boss was like, "Hey, like, no, we still work in December." And the guy's like, "Oh, interesting." And there's so much going on in December. This is where all the fun stuff happens. And if you run a business, like I do, and I work with a lot of business owners. Soren, our guest today, is a business owner. There's a lot of end of year stuff to consider and things like that. So it never ends. I'm all the way up. I'm all the way up here, actually.
Unless you're in the position like me and like many people this week who got laid off. I didn't get laid off this week, but I'm in the position of being between jobs, which sounds much better than being unemployed. And December, this is the second December that I've been between jobs. I worked most of the year, but I'm thinking I might need to make this a thing where like work most of the year and then lose a job sometime mid-fall and just ride out the end of the year. And then you don't have to worry about EOD, meaning end of day or end of December.
Yeah, I mean, look, like there's layoffs happening everywhere too. I mean, we discussed this on the show here and there, but everyone knows Spotify. Like I love Spotify. We all know Spotify, and they did, everyone on the customer side, right? It's like, most people, I'm sure most of our listeners have Spotify, and a lot of people do, and everyone's doing their end of the year stuff. They're a Spotify rapper. Here's your favorite, you're in the top 8% of Taylor Swift fans and whatever, and everyone's sharing their stuff around. And then, Spotify did have a big layoff. They announced
as they announced, quite significant profits, also laying off 17% of the workforce.
Yeah.
Well, the great thing about December in one part of the world where I used to work, and I worked in France for a number of years. If you're on salary there, first of all, it basically means that you have a tenured role. It's very hard to get fired once you're have a certain type of contract, which a lot of people have, and you get paid on a 13-month basis. So December rolls around, and not only do you get your salary, you also get your 13-month salary.
Which, 13-month.
Yeah, which brings a whole new meaning to end.
Well, isn't that why there used to be 10 months in like the Roman Empire or something, and then they wanted to collect taxes twice more a year, so then they added 2 more months, like December, DEC, like DEC, that's 10. So this should be like the 10th month, but then they added 2 more in there. I don't know, but look, we've got a really fun show today. We've got a good friend of mine, Soren Larson, coming on. He is the co-founder CEO of Crosshatch, and Soren's worked a number of years in the data space. Knows all about data markets, selling data, how data gets sold, collected in places. Has a lot of opinions about what's wrong in these markets today, how this should be right, how customers should be thinking about how their data is used, how brands should be thinking about all that. So we're going to have a really exciting show today because we're talking with an expert here. And
never bring anyone less than a world-class expert on Tech Bros.
It's only world-class experts. I mean, we talk to 2 every week. It's you and I, Mary. But Soren, good to have you on.
It's awesome to be here. I'm glad to have met your bar.
Just barely, Soren. Just barely.
Soren. I mean, like, tell us like a little bit about like what you've done, and you've in your career you've worked for places like Walmart. You've worked for, we're kind of around the ad tech space. What are some of the things you've done before, and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, indeed, it's so cool to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, so I was going to become an economist. Ended up studying pure math and got a master's in applied math. And since I've worked in sort of New York tech for about a decade, first job out of grad school was actually fighting Russian bots, of all things. It turned out that as it turns out that engineers in Russia could make pretty decent money by setting up or orchestrating a bot farm. They were often positioned or run on servers in South America, they would engineers would buy websites, domains that no one would go to, and then have these headless browsers visit their site as well as other sites like Neiman Marcus or Nordstrom.com or whatever, toward collecting cookies to demonstrate that indeed they're a good consumer that advertisers would want to sell to. And then they would approach companies like AppNexus to like say, hey, I've got these amazing domains, you should put your ads here, even though no one was actually going to any of these sites. And so I was actually responsible for building these algorithms to fight these bots. In addition, I've sold data to hedge funds. I know this whole world. I've also worked at Walmart, where I was actually working for a former quant from Renaissance Technologies. Indeed, Rentech was one of the most important, best performing hedge funds in the world.
Huge quant traders. If people don't know what Renaissance is, like they're the PhD, like huge brain people.
Yeah, and at Walmart, I had access to like all grocery orders that went through Walmart. And I was tasked by Mark Lowry to use this data to predict what people would want next. And one thing we found, despite, there's a Walmart store within 10 miles of 90% of all Americans. Like Walmart is a consumer staples business. If there were a company with amazing data on like what consumers want, Walmart is a great example of it. But what we found is that even with Walmart's great data, we didn't have that much signal into what people wanted. Despite working with some great people who are very good at predicting time series. And so all of that together has sort of just led me to this place of, I don't know, being like cognizant and sensitive to data flows across the internet, how they can be used in sort of good and like perhaps less savory ways. And also just being interested in the future of tech. I think, I think just generally I think there's a conversation going on now where people are just not that interested. Like, everyday Americans are not that interested in what tech is shipping. I've sort of felt that way. I felt like, I haven't felt like really excited about what tech has shipped since maybe the iPad came out and I could, touch a screen, a liquid screen, and it would sort of come alive. And so for those reasons, we're building Crosshatch, a way to safely hyper-personalize the internet. I'll pause there and
Yeah. So hyper-personalization, like what does that mean?
Yeah, it's I did this as an exercise. I'm perhaps you'll find this interesting. I sort of like was looking at the history of personalization. How did this all come about? And it's really like looking over. You can really like sort of think about it over like 100 years, really. You can look at sort of where personalization started, namely, you could say it didn't really exist at all, or rather, like you look at like the Sears Roebucks of the world, where just catalogs of everything. And so in that sense, you could say it's personalized in the sense that if there's at least one page that has something you want, quite American. It's quite extraordinary, Sears. Personalization was then developed. I think maybe this is now in the 50s. By creating products that were made specifically for certain segments of users. For example, indeed, a Diet Coke. I think even Dodge created a car that was specifically made for women. It was only around for a year, I think. But in this world, like companies started to like specialize products towards certain segments. I think then in the 80s it developed to, or maybe in the 80s we started to see like richer psychographic profiles like. That were done by sort of surveys that were then offered or to companies as a service. I think I actually can't remember the name of the company that famously did this. But then for example, in the late 90s and early 2000s, Amex I think was one of the first to really lean into personalization with its loyalty program and it could observe like what people were buying and start to actually specialize its services for each consumer. Of course, I don't need to tell you what personalization has been in the last decade with CRMs and obviously even further machine learning driven solutions. But when we think about hyper personalization, we think about it of moving beyond like inferences from clicks and scrolls and transactions, and actually it's actually a return to more simple personalization, namely just referencing facts about people. So today, if you get personalization on TikTok or Facebook or Snap, it's a function of all of your engagements thus far on a platform. But of course, not all platforms are endowed with such rich data. Even I mean, Walmart is endowed with quite rich data, but an average e-commerce store is not, and many sort of emerging consumer apps are not. And so they have much limited means to actually provide personalization, at least as we've come to expect on these what we now see are quite addictive platforms. And so hyper personalization is the ascension from this, namely where consumers share information about themselves to the ends of getting more personalization. It's a movement beyond people like you, where like the notion of like you is you click the same and scroll the same. It's literally like people like you, as for example, as inferred by a language model and in reference to specific details about a customer. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. But I still don't know what Crosshatch does. You'll get into that.
No.
But your hyper personalization, you're presenting as something that ultimately benefits the producer of somebody, the thing who's selling, not the consumer, because obviously each side has different goals, right? As a consumer, ideally, we're hoping to protect our data and to a certain degree, maybe only get recommendations that truly benefit us versus.
Yeah, I mean, our interest is in a mutual benefit. I think when we think about hyper personalization, we think about it in I think a good place to look at it is from a human context. For example, when you go to your bodega, I don't know if there are bodegas in LA, but when you go to your bodega, the guy who works there, you may be friends with him. He knows what you often get. Maybe he knows your name. He knows maybe when, I don't know if you have such a relationship with your bodega such that he knows like when your partner's birthday is, maybe that your florist does. But that level of personalization we've come to expect from the local places that we go to. But on the internet, that sort of personalization, I think today would feel creepy because it's like, how do you know this? Like, how did you come to know this? It's like a little. On the other hand, if there were a chill way for you to share this information or information like it with businesses on the internet in a way you controlled and were chill, maybe be open to it. Because indeed, you do like the florist knowing your partner's birthday. You like that the guy at the bodega knows that you like a bacon, egg, and cheese with an extra egg. So our interest in hyper-personalization is not to try to help. I mean, indeed, we're hopeful that when businesses can serve customers better, they're able to sell more because they're serving customers better. It's aligned. But we're hopeful for a mutual benefit. I'm happy to share more what Crosshatch does, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. What so Soren, you and I have talked extensively in the past about just one-on-one about all the things that like are wrong with data markets today.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned creepy a little bit earlier. That's a word that comes up sometimes. Like what like from both the consumer side, like Mary, Lauren, Soren as consumers, what is wrong with data markets today? And then just from the economics of like the business of people who like collect and buy and sell data, like what's also wrong there? Because in my opinion, there's like, the consumer often has no idea what they're signing up for. They don't read the terms and services, and then they like a product, and then 6 months, a year later, a huge data breach happened, or like the terms say that we can sell our data to wherever, and now you're getting spammed by something, and it's because you signed up for this one thing. What's wrong with all of this? Just like this whole economy right now of this data markets and how they work.
Yeah, there are a few things. I'll first talk about the consumer thing, and then we can talk about the business space because the business also sucks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But let's start with the consumer piece. I think the thing that bugs me the most is like this. There's a sleight of hand. It's like the canonical like onboarding is, come use our amazing product. It's free and fun, and it does this cool thing for you. And then sometimes, indeed, it doesn't all, the terms of service don't always even say this. I can name names of services that didn't say anything about the following, but the terms that none of us read. And I think it's a little like, anti-humanistic to expect that on every single onboarding you should read the terms of service, because I mean, indeed, there's, you know, like when you're trying to sign up for a new app that promises to do something, you're like, maybe you're on the subway platform, whatever, you don't have the time to go and read it. And even if you did, like, what are you going to do about it? You're going to go call them up being like, sir, I really love your service, but these terms make me feel uncomfortable. They're going to say too bad. So even if you did read it, it's not as if you have much of a choice. But of course, many of these terms of service say stuff like, your data are yours, but we might anonymize or aggregate your data and use it, and we get a so-called irrevocable worldwide license to use this anonymized aggregated data to improve our services, or for whatever, or sometimes they even say for whatever reason we want. And I can even note, if you don't mind getting nerdy about legal, oftentimes, like, another route for businesses to exploit this is that they don't actually define what the services are. So the services could be, capital S, could be anything. So, and further, like, anonymization isn't defined, aggregation isn't defined. So like this pattern gives businesses basically just full right to really do quite like give it quite a lot of leeway in terms of what they can do with data that's shared. And consumers don't have much, they can't really say no. And they don't have an opportunity to say no, other than just not joining the app, which is, not fun.
And I feel like the typical consumer is even people who work in fields like us is sort of in this, well, I know my data is being used by lots of people, and I don't really, I've sort of abandoned any control of it, and that's it.
And you brought up, and here's one thing, and I'll share this real quick, because I know you developed it just as this isn't your company or what you're building, but you just made a side project, datamine.me, which I think is fun. I've been playing with it constantly. And here, let me share this real quick. And so this is this is what you made, datamine.me, and you can enter a URL here. And what you're going to do is, like, basically look through the terms and conditions of something, and start returning things back to a customer, so they can see, like, oh, where in the terms is there a possible way that this company might have a data moat, or be able to be like taking data from me that maybe I don't know about. And so I've recommended this to several people in the B2B world, where, like, if you're signing a B2B contract, you can usually like do a red line and like get your stuff. If you're a company and you're using, I don't know, your run-of-the-mill modern data stack company or something, and like this is a good way to just like go in and check, like, all right, hey, what's on these terms of services? Am I like giving all my data away to a SaaS vendor or something?
Can we do a little live demo? Type something in there.
Yeah. What's a good company to check?
You should try SAS Grid.
I'll do SAS Grid. Yeah, like I got the HTTP.
Make it a little bigger if you can, Lauren.
Yeah. Here, it's is it SAS Grid? Is it .com or .io? Yeah, I know what company you're talking about. Here, let me look this up. SAS Grid. Yeah, so this popped up a couple months ago. SAS Grid.
So so what's happening here is this is a side project, but it goes to sasgrid.com and tries to find the terms of service and privacy policy, stuffs the what it finds into actually Google's text bison with the instruction of find out whether or not interesting. Find out whether or not the company is using your data to build a data mode. So it appears that the scraper, which is quite naive, it just tries to just go and get, doesn't do any sort of magic with in terms of a proxy to try to get the data, was blocked because you saw the response, no data was provided.
Yeah. It looks like so. SAS Grid, right? I mean, like I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but like SAS Grid is, a company that launched a couple months ago. I know the founder. I know it's a David Sachs, Craft Ventures. If you're an all-in podcast fan, you'll know David Sachs. Like this is one of his babies that he's made. One of his new companies he's put together. And with SAS Grid, right? Like what you're seeing here is like customer success. Like, oh, we can make cohorts, and here's Q1 of this year, and here's our cohorts and cool things like that. A lot of things that standard analytics people, data engineering people would understand. Let me see if I can find the terms on here.
Maybe in about.
I don't know if they still have it up, but
they don't just have it at the bottom of the website usually in its own tab.
Oh, they do. Yes,
they do. I just like using search for it. Yeah, and so like a lot of these companies,
yes,
you'll see.
I just I found it. I can put it in the chat. So the customer hereby grants SAS Grid a royalty-free license to use customer information in an aggregated and anonymized manner, provided that such use case does not allow a third party to identify a customer or any authorized user. So ostensibly, the terms give SAS Grid the ability to create insights at an aggregate level over synced customer information, and to use it. Actually, well, I'd have to continue reading the terms, but to use it, unclear for what reason.
So they can use it for whatever they want, and like these are, and like people like here's one of my things, and like I get on a soapbox, I put on my tinfoil hat, and stand outside of conferences. I don't physically do that, but metaphorically do that
virtually.
Virtually, about things like like you can sign up for SAS Grid. Maybe it's great. Like you want to figure out what's our churn over here, what's our blah 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 over here, but like this is run by a SaaS investor. And there's no shade on any of these folks there who work on this, but like they invest in software companies. So you could be financing and giving data to someone who's going to make your next competitor, right? Like you're like I'm making a SaaS. I'm doing some cool stuff here. Like I'm using a company to build. I'm using SAS Grid to figure out my metrics. But then you give them, all this data so they can, basically do whatever they want with it. And like, what are they doing with it? Well, like they're SaaS investors. So if they see that, like, you're an app and you do PLG marketing software towards, Shopify companies that do ABC, and there's you and 2 or 3 other competitors like you that all use SAS Grid, they know how this market works. And they can say, all right, well, we're going to make a competitor there. And so you could be financing your own competitor. And they wouldn't, you wouldn't have that happen. And, but, by using this product and trying to tinker with your margins a little bit, you might be giving away a lot more than you think you are, is my only point here.
Mm-hmm. We've got a great question, which might be more things we're going to talk about later in the show, but we could do a little sidebar if Soren, if you have thoughts on this, or Lauren. It's from Tiffany Morrison, who says there's been a growing movement by consumers in California and some other places to be compensated by companies for use of their data. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. So I've previously sold data to hedge funds. I know the shtick. My hot take is that compensate, like, just the markets for data, the mechanisms that could facilitate compensation are, I don't want to be as strong as say inherently, but they are often very bad. A lot of us just sort of take as given that markets work, that they're efficient, that price discovery works. But the market for data, at least as I've seen it, is a I think, what is it called? It's the market for data usually has very few buyers, and the contracts that underwrite that or facilitate the exchange of these data are negotiated usually quite rarely. And what that means is that the ability for a data seller to get a good price, and usually a data seller will operate on behalf of a consumer because the data often will need to be aggregated and perhaps anonymized, is limited. Further, there's a very interesting dynamic governing data markets, which actually corresponds to a Nobel Prize winning economic theory called the market for lemons, coined by George Akerlof in the 70s. The market for lemons is a very simple concept. You go to a used car lot. On the used car lot, there are two types of cars. There are peaches, like good cars that you want to buy, and lemons, those that are going to break down as soon as you wire the money. And the problem that George Akerlof studied was, well, what happens to markets when sellers know the true nature of the market, but buyers do not? And I'm happy to give you the sort of describes what happens to the market. But what's interesting in data markets, and is quite counterintuitive, you wouldn't sort of expect this, because this case where a seller would be better informed than a buyer makes a ton of sense. The seller has the object, ostensibly they know the properties of the object. They should, that makes a lot of sense. But in data markets, interestingly, the seller is less well informed than the buyer is. And interestingly, the buyer has incentives to keep it that way. And so I sort of laugh because it's just quite extraordinary. But to make this concrete, what often happens is that sellers are competing. So they're candidate sellers of data compete with each other to sell data in a data market. They don't want to tell each other how they're doing. So for competitive reasons, they don't talk. But buyers are in a position to see the whole market because they're ostensibly going to buy data. And the usual way that data markets work is that a buyer will insist that a seller give them a sample of the data so that they can check to see, well, how additive is this data to an existing process I have? And so indeed, data buyers get to sample all of the data and indeed they get to find out, well, how much value does this deliver to my trading algorithm or to my marketing or whatever. But of course, a seller would love to know then, well, so how much value did you find in my data? But a buyer is not incentivized to tell the seller this, because if they do, then the seller's going to be like, well, that should be my price. You have just named my new, you're poised to make, X million dollars or whatever on my, well, that's, thank you for telling me the price. And so for this reason, although in theory, data markets are ostensibly are a nice mechanism, I should be compensated for it, that feels reasonable. They also, in practice, they just don't work. So those who engage in it will often find themselves disappointed because of just market structure. So on one hand, in theory, I really like the idea of people should, people are contributing to value for other people. They should be compensated. But the reality of it is that just data markets tend not to work very well. And so even if they do get compensated, it's actually not the fair value. And so have you made the world a better place? So anyway.
That's really yeah. I love that, I'm an economics person is my background. And I really love your take, Soren, because you're an economics person. And, we've found our way into the tech world in our careers. The whole idea of people being compensated for their data. In my opinion, right now, Like if a company wants to collect more data on more people, what do? Well, they come up with a gimmick, or they come up with they lower their selling prices of what they're offering so that more people go in there and give more data. And here I want to show an example of a really funny one I found this week. Have you seen the Domino's pizza shoveling or snowplow? Did you see that this week?
I didn't. Excuse me.
Oh, so here I'll share this real quick.
Snowflake, Snowflake, right?
What was that, Mary?
Their partnership with Snowflake. That's what you're.
No, Snowflake. It has nothing to do with Snowflake. I don't think they use Snowflake at Domino's, but maybe. But here, so do you remember a couple of years ago when Domino's was like, we're going to start paving streets for people? We're going to start, like, if you have potholes in your town that your town is not filling up, you can go ahead and put in your zip code, give us your email, and write a blurb or something or whatever, and we will figure out and we will fill your potholes, but we'll put our Domino's logo on it, right? Which is like pretty dystopian because hey, our local governments fail in the U.S. But now the new thing that they came up with is it's like the ceremonial second piece of this, which is plowing for pizza. So if you and Domino's, they've been promoting this on social media a lot in the last couple of days. Everyone the Voxes, I don't know if Vox did it specifically, but the Voxes and the Quartzes and everyone picks it up kind of ironically. But in plowing for pizza, Domino's is giving away $500,000, $500,000, nothing to Domino's, across 20 towns in need of plowing assistance. And if they plow your streets, you can get better access to hot pizza because you can go and pick up the order, or the takeout. The delivery driver can get to you better. And this is because a lot of towns will leave their snowplows, maybe it's underfunded, or maybe they hit only the highways first, but not the roads and whatever. And, this is a constant thing people gripe about throughout the world, in big cities, in small cities. So if you want to go nominate your town, put in your zip code, put in your email address. Here, I'll do this right now. Lauren, uprightanalytics.com. I'll agree to the terms. I won't opt into that. And let's see if uptown Manhattan can see if Harlem gets on here. I don't Domino's pizza if you live in New York City, first of all. But this is a great data collection tool that they're doing here. And if they get new emails from people, they know how everyone who's interacted with it before. They've made a truck, plowing for pizza. Cold road shouldn't happen to hot pizza, and they're going to have a great marketing outcome for all this. I think this is just one of the most interesting things that I've seen in the last month or two, because hiring private plows that are Domino's branded are not that expensive for Domino's. They could run this whole thing on a couple $1 million. If they get a lot of people to sign up and give them data insights into who they are and what they might be interested in. And if they say, hey, my town's not good at pizza delivery because in the winter, because our roads are not clear, that's very interesting for Domino's. They can run some models on this. So I think the whole thing's fascinating.
And it's the thing is, there's very little that's high tech about it. It's there's a lot of old school elements in it within this.
Well, you're looking at a front end and a back end here. Customers are mad because maybe they live in a place where their local government's not very good, or whoever does it, whether it's private or public, is not very good at plowing streets in the winter. The towns that they've already said that we've done this in, I think it's Erie, Pennsylvania, Marquette, Michigan, which is on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. You know, cold weather places, lake effect snow, and then Manhattan, Montana. And I don't know. It's really interesting to see this play out from a data perspective. This is the most interesting data collection thing I've seen in the last month or so, and it's this type of stuff just fascinates me. But I'll take a pause there.
I love the Domino's pizza sidebar. I'm gonna go fill it out for my Los Angeles address and see if we can get some.
Yeah, all the snowplows in LA that
come clear off the roads covered with tar from the tar pits or something. Soren, I'd be again bringing. It's fun to kind of do the consumer market sidebars, but do you have any fun anecdotes about sort of the modes with which, or the platforms on which data is being collected that consumers would be sort of the most surprised by? Or do you feel like in general the public sort of is aware that this is happening, but they've kind of resigned themselves to it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess before starting out, I would just note, like, I mean, and like some folks at the Atlantic have written about this a lot. Like, I don't want to come across as if we are not saying, like, you know, don't share data online. You know, like even folks at the Atlantic agree that it's like, you know, who are sort of wary of how data flow across the internet. Like, they use Google Maps. Google Maps has like very tight location tracking. So I think there's a balance to be found of, well, you know, I don't want to be tracked everywhere, but I also recognize that there can be some value, some convenience that's unlocked by sharing information. I don't know. I think the classic examples. Oh, well, so the most egregious example, and I've actually not seen very much documentation on this, and it's actually honestly sort of concerning. Apparently, some internet service providers have been sued for selling data. Indeed, internet service providers essentially observe all internet traffic. I think actually I can look now. I think I don't want to name names before. Yeah, so like, I don't know. It appears that I'm like, if you just like search like AT&T selling data, like some stuff comes up, for example. And yeah, I don't want to put that, but like, anyway, I've seen notes that even the government has been involved in asking ISPs to stop selling data. That's pretty surprising. I mean, maybe it's, well, or maybe, you know, in our cynical world, we shouldn't be that surprised. You know, I like another thing, you know, people might not know is that, like, it's actually been very interesting. Apple, for example, has been cracking down on apps in terms of like apps registering specific reasons why they ask for certain information, not just in terms of their nutrition scorecard, but I think they've been doing something in the back end. I'm not as on it as I actually should be, but to try to block developers from like grabbing information that they don't need. But a canonical example was that, and this is sort of crazy, just like how much of a Wild West this has been. But there were noted some flashlight apps that you know, in onboarding asked, "Oh, can we get access to your location data?" And we're selling information to data brokers, a flashlight app. And I think, you know, you raise your eyebrows. Like, we should all raise our eyebrows, because it's like, what does a flashlight app need with my location? And I think when at least when I think about privacy or even just data flows in the internet, I feel like the thing that I feel like we actually talk about privacy too much. I feel like discussions of privacy are rather like really like a mea culpa for like how like creepy the internet has become. It's like, we're tracking you, but we feel bad about it. I think rather discussions of privacy, when people talk about privacy, they're really concerned about control. They just want to have a more active voice in, well, what am I giving up in order to get this convenience? Indeed, like, you can sort of say, like, when you're signing up for a flashlight app, it's not, you know, I think it's reasonable to expect, and actually a notion of reasonableness is actually used by CCPA, by the way. So I think it's fair for me to invoke, you know, like what a consumer might understand as reasonable, but it's reasonable to expect that my flashlight app is not tracking me and tracking where I go. I think that's pretty reasonable. And so I think you know, a lot of my interest, you know, in this space is just around like just sort of riding the ship in terms of like consumer expectations and what actually happens when a consumer onboards to a new application. So often it's been sign up for this cool app, it's free and fun, but actually it's doing something that maybe if a consumer were directly asked, they'd probably say no to. Um, so I don't know. I hope that helps.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure. And I even think like a lot of people don't understand, like there's a lot of like financial apps out there that are like, I don't know. I mean, like there's like Rocket Money is one, and I've used Rocket Money in the past, but like I got rid of it when they became Rocket Money.
I need to get rid of it.
It was called TransferWise.
Then Truebill.
Or Truebill, sorry, not Truebill. And like, you know, it's a way to like, oh, hey, here's your, like, what does the consumer get out of it? Well, the consumer gets see like, oh, here's your like recurring subscriptions that maybe you haven't turned off, because everyone signs up for recurrings. Businesses sign up for recurring SaaS that they don't know that they like, you know, have stopped using 2 years ago. Consumers sign up for recurring stuff. And so, you know, I'd signed up for it a while ago and I was like, oh, this is cool. Whatever. But then they got sold to Rocket Mortgage, which is like, you know, a big, you know, it's run by, you know, Dan Gilbert. He's the guy who put mortgages on the internet back in the, you know, late 90s. And like now, like it's pretty clear that they're using this to like figure out like consumer sentiment instead of buying data to figure out, you know, how much the consumer is spending and if the consumer's what the consumer's putting on a credit card. You know, they just bought one of these companies that gives them a good, you know, proxy of the market. And it's a smart business move for them because like why should they pay a third party for that? Like if they can just run it themselves and run it in-house, it can make sense. It could be a smart business move. But yeah, I mean that's, you know, that's what it is. Like you know, and now they're going to figure out how to like where to look to like market stuff to consumers for mortgages, which is you know, mortgages right now are, in my opinion, you know, as bad as they were before the housing crisis, the GFC 10 years ago. So, anyways, but look, like I don't want to be all like doom and gloom and crazy about this stuff because there's a bunch of ways out of fixing these types of things, and Soren, you're someone that like I've, you know, talked to and I like and I admire your takes on a lot of this stuff. Like what with Crosshatch, which I believe you're going to release, you know, early next year. Like what are ways to do this better, and how are you specifically, you know, going to help drive that and make this better for consumers and make this, you know, better for, you know, brands and stuff. So there's not this like, you know, silly data market stuff that's going on now necessarily.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think the place that we really start from is just like we're very interested in just human agency. Like, you know, so far on the internet, it's just there's just been this dynamic of like, oh, it's free and fun, but we're actually doing some weird stuff, or we're actually doing some stuff that, you know, if we were to ask you about it, you probably wouldn't be chill with, but it's in the terms, and so if you agree, you're chill with it, but you know, maybe you're not. So what I can just share what Crosshatch is and then answer your question. So Crosshatch is a personal data wallet that allows you to share and unshare your data to unlock hyper-personalized experiences that allow brands to serve you in a whole new way. And so, like, what does that mean? Or I can give sort of an example of an experience that we're building for. Imagine Expedia.com. Expedia has shipped Expedia GPT. You can experience it on their mobile app. It's an AI that you can chat with to help you plan a trip. The New York Times even wrote about them. The New York Times had sort of mixed reviews. For example, they noted that it was actually pretty cool. The New York Times writer went to Milan. I got to test this in Milan. Must be nice. But
someone just wanted to go to Milan and write a story.
Me too. Like,
no to plan their trip to Milan. Like, come on, like talk about the world does not need. Like, there's plenty of resources to do that already. But yeah.
But like, what was interesting is that Expedia GPT didn't even know that this writer was in Milan. didn't even know.
Mm.
And so I think when we think about, I mean, indeed, Crosshatch is not just useful for AI, but AI is a classical sort of a case we're especially excited about. We sort of expect, I mean, I sort of expect Jarvis, Tony Stark's Jarvis. It just knows what's going on. And so the experience we're building for is, and indeed, Expedia is actually sort of leaning into this as well. Expedia will ask, say, Mary, hey, Mary, we're shipping this hyper-personalized experience. We invite you to log in with your Crosshatch account. We invite you to connect the following data sources. Your credit card information, so we know what places you'd like to go in LA. Your Instagram, so we know your vibe, your aesthetics, and your calendar, so we know when you're free. We have actually, we're building a data representation that allows for really specific permissioning. We're not going to have it probably in Q1, but we'll probably have more specific permissioning later next year. But then when you share your data, it only connects to your personal data wallet. Expedia doesn't get to see any of it. But when you start engaging with Expedia GPT is able to call out to the API that we host on your behalf, and allows Expedia GPT to make references to your information and get inferences from it without actually touching any of your underlying data. And so what we're excited about is this can unlock like super expressive, hyper-personalized experiences that can take us back to the guy at the bodega who knows our order, but in a sort of a chill way that we control, because Expedia, when you connected, says, hey, Mary, we're using your data for personalized travel. That's the only thing we're going to do with your data. And by the way, we're not even touching it. It just stays in your Crosshatch wallet. And so I think the way that we resolve all of this is instead, like right now, brands have so little data. Like it's well known, like just even like we know Walmart may not even have that much data, but everybody else just doesn't have enough data. And so because of that, and we all sort of recognize, at least folks who are in the data space recognize, that building a data moat is a core way to build a competitive advantage. The more you know about a customer, the better you can serve them, of course. But what that's led to is like a race for everybody to surveil us as much as possible. At the same time, each individual business's ability to surveil us, even though it's sort of creepy, is also sort of limited. So everybody is sprinting to try to collect little snippets, little trinkets about us that don't actually represent who we are, and end up feeling sort of invasive because people are so aggressively trying to track everything. And so we say, well, perhaps the solution then is for consumers just to bring in all their data into one place and to just permission it out as is useful to them across the internet. So hopefully that makes sense. I think that maybe the TLDR is like consent.
The current reality is sort of creepy. What you're describing is also potentially sort of creepy, but like creepy with permission. Like, I've given these companies or organizations permission to access these parts, and at least, it's totally fascinating. Would you say the only company I would say that probably has enough data to not, right now is Amazon?
Could you say it one more time? Sorry.
Is Amazon, like, compared to Walmart, for example, Amazon has data from consumers across so many,
well, I think a lot of them have a lot of data because they also buy data to enrich.
They also buy data, but they have it like,
it's not just first party. It's like a lot of these companies buy it from elsewhere.
So let's hear more about that market, that third party, the all data market.
The data market that Amazon engages in, or
no, not Amazon. That was just kind of a side thought on Amazon, that they, compared to say Walmart, they'd be the only company that really has. I would imagine they have a lot more data than Amazon has.
No, I mean,
I mean, if you want to be technical about it, I think LiveRamp, Axiom, even Oracle. Oracle is one of the biggest data buyers and sellers out there. People don't know that. People just think Oracle is like an on-prem, like in the data world. Oracle is an on-prem database solution for running stuff. Oracle is actually one of the biggest, largest buyers and sellers and reaggregators of data in the world. Like, and you can go look that up. Yeah. And there's LiveRamp out there. People will know LiveRamp, Axiom, Epsilon. There's a bunch out there, and this is like they have a bunch of data on you and everything. So And
When we're actually returning to California, I think just recently California passed a law regulating specifically data brokers. I believe it's called the Delete Act. Previously, CCPA gave consumers rights to like go to a business and say, "Hey, will you delete any data on me?" In addition to a right to access their data. But now it appears that California is conferring consumers an ability to only have to express that desire once, and data brokers have to have 45 days within which to affirm that they have complied with this request. I mean, so Merritt, like, I'd love to return you. So you noted, Canada creepiness of this, possible, this crosshatch, this pattern. I guess I'd push back. I mean, of course I would, but
Yeah.
like, I think, indeed, like, I don't know if maybe use Google Maps or Waze or whatever. Like,
All of them, yeah.
I mean, essentially that's pretty creepy. I mean,
Totally.
they know they know where you are right now.
But also enormously helpful.
Yeah.
Like I can get across the
Yes.
city without
So
them.
to the extent that you can trust that like your data are safe and that you can control how they're used, that, and it like delivers value to you, maybe that's chill. Maybe the sort of conveniences that are unlocked are worth it. But it's up to, like, we're not here to tell you what to do. But we also give you the means to use your data. I mean, I think one reason I sort of have a chip on my shoulder about, not about this, but sort of about a related issue, is that today all these businesses collect all this data about us, and it's really, and they're able to collect this because of our engagement with them. So they only have this data because we engage with them in the first place. But they are just by virtue of doing business with us, they are the ones who get to decide how those data are used, even though it's at least by the law, it's our data too. It's our data too. And so what's weird, and like a thing we're trying to resolve, is it shouldn't just be that the businesses that we engage with are the exclusive ones who get to decide how it's used. For example, we saw the 8 Sleep founder, like, he was posting analytics about how people are sleeping. TB, like, indeed, it's a lot about the terms, whatever. I mean, he should do his thing. But if he's going to use the data, like, why shouldn't 8 Sleep users get to use their own data too? To the extent that there's value, and especially with AI, we know there's a lot of value. Like, there's a lot that can be done with new context. When you add context to AI, we've seen, all of us have engaged with ChatGPT. We know it's quite powerful. It shouldn't just be that the single business that we happen to engage with gets to be the exclusive decider of how our data are used. And that opinion is that's not just me saying that. The law of 12 states seem to say this, that we have a right to access the data about us. The EU says this. So I think really I would invite you to understand us as we're just we wish to sort of be a mechanism that sort of operationalizes a lot of these laws that are increasingly passed. The voice of the people. I don't know. But yeah.
When you start writing your marketing strategies, come back and listen to what you said here, and you've got some good stuff going here. I like it.
If anyone has questions, and we have a few good comments on here, but if anyone has questions before we wrap up for Soren or any of us, type them out. We'll read them off. But I think people might not be sure what you were talking about with the 8 Sleep thing. I'm just gonna pull something up here real quick of what that was. It's really simple.
It was during the
Sam Altman stuff.
Yeah.
And it's
weekend, we'll call it.
During tech
something we purposely
nonsense weekend. But look, I mean, like, let me pull this up. And so,
is 8 Sleep a mattress company, like a smart mattress, or what are they?
Yeah, it's like a smart mattress. I think of it as a smart mattress. And so you have an app, you have like the mattress cover and the system that you build into it. And they have like a little thing you can like put liquid in. And based on how your sleeping patterns work, which it will get to know over time, like, it can cool the bed, or it learns about your sleep, and like can heat and cool based on your sleeping patterns. And I think they've done a good job at it. I really do. People love it and everything, but after this came up, the OpenAI drama is real. This was a couple weeks ago. We checked our data. San Francisco saw a spike in low quality sleep. There was a 27% increase in people getting under 5 hours of sleep. We need to sleep the source 8 sleep data. And so if you look okay, what's 8 sleep data? If you look at this, they're like haven't solved, in Snowflake, and they have some analysts, running DBT models on this and whatever. A lot of people were on here, saying hey, this is creepy. Makes me feel uncomfortable with the product now. Other people were saying hey, this is good for productivity. Why would you post this? Nothing would make me want to own this product less. Some people think, hey, maybe this is not something I want, even though it's in the terms of service, even though it's all, if you sign up for the platform, it's what you're agreeing to. Some people, don't like that. And, enough people shared this around that this guy, he's a known founder around the space. He's not a big internet celebrity or anything. A lot of people got bad enough or upset enough, or internet upset and mad enough that this got shared around 4 million times. So, hey, maybe it's been a good marketing thing for him. Maybe it's been the opposite. I don't know. But it's interesting about how people, think about how data is used. But we have one final question here from Tiffany Morrison, who says, Soren, in your day-to-day life, what do you and don't you do to protect your data?
My everyday life. I for example, I'm sure everybody remembers the Lensa app. And I guess it's still around. I don't mean to be, we love Lensa, whatever. But, at first you have to pardon me when I saw the Lensa. Maybe the Lensa app was the thing that you can take a few selfies and then it will make AI avatars of you. It's what everyone was doing when, everyone was doing it for a minute. They had amazing revenue, at least, and maybe they still do. But you'd have to pardon me. When I first saw this, I was like, is this maybe you remember there was a previous app I think it was called Facetune, that the New York Times ended up writing about, and apparently the images that were uploaded to Facetune, I think it made you beautiful or something, were actually passed, I think, to foreign governments. So what I did use Lensa app, I did make an AI avatar. It's actually on my Twitter, whatever. But did I think was oh gosh, is this one of these things that's there's something inside the terms that allow that it, is this actually a data collection play? But I did it anyway, and I think this just reflects this dynamic of sharing, just sharing things about ourselves. Indeed, in this conversation, we're sharing things about we're having a conversation, whatever. We don't think of this as a data sharing in the sort of stilted manner that a lot of the internet is in. There's value in connecting. There can be value in connecting with each other. But so I guess I when I see things that seem overtly weird, I definitely hold back. Actually, the other day, just as an aside, I actually found out that there are allegations that a dating app even sold facial data to the facial recognition companies, just to give context for how overt, how outrageous some of this stuff is. It's oh, LOL, we happen to have data, so we're gonna sell it. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but at the same time, we all want to find love, so it's complicated. I hope that answers.
Yeah, and that brings it back to 8 sleep mattress, because you can have Hinge on one side, and you can get the Hinge data to see when 2 people came together, and then all of a sudden the eight sleep mattress now can recognize that there's 2 bodies on it, but then all of a sudden there's 1 body on it because you broke up, and then and some hedge fund can figure out how to work this into a model and trade on you.
Lauren, of course you take it there. I mean, but maybe.
But
yeah, there's,
what I love about that answer, Soren, I imagine Tiffany, like most of us, probably wanted like here's the 3 to 5 things you should and shouldn't do. And I like that you didn't give a pat, answer, because even for someone who is a world-class tech bro expert in this stuff, these are almost like day-to-day complicated decisions that you have to think through and probably make some, moral and ethical compromises as we go. But soon enough, we'll all have Crosshatch, which will be with us. We'll be making those decisions for us. So again, this is not an advertisement for Crosshatch. I think that's clear, but it was great for me to learn about it anyway. I'm super excited. And I feel like, as usual with our guests, we got into about 5% of what we would have liked to cover. So we will just have to have you back, right?
I love it, but this was super fun.
And Soren, where can people find you? Where can they, you got a website up now lately, like where can people find you, talk to you, learn more about you and what you're building?
Yep. You can find us at crosshatch.io. I'm just Soren at crosshatch.io. LinkedIn. I don't think there are that many Soren Larsons. Twitter, same. On Twitter, I recently have been getting a lot into like philosophy of language, but otherwise, like, the usual data nonsense. But yeah, I'd love to hear from you. We're attempting to like safely hyper personalize the internet. Seems fun.
Yeah, it's a big undertaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of doom and gloom and scary stuff, but lots of good things happening. So awesome. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And thanks, as always, Lauren. And thanks for being here, Soren. We'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.